Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. With me right now is nobody at all. In just a few minutes, I'll be joined by my guest host, Alan Bishop, my lovely good friend, Drew Crawley, and our wonderful guest, Mr. Todd Leopold, for part 2 of our conversation with him. So be ready for that. It's coming up here in just a minute. But before we get to it, I have a few announcements to share with you. First of all, Bar Cart Co-op. Alan's on the show with us tonight. He also does Distillers Talk with Christy Atkinson. Distillers Talk is a great show. They talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about distillation techniques, what kind of stills they use, everything from soup to nuts in terms of distillation. They'll talk about it. They'll cover it on this show. If you're more interested in how did this that's in my bottle really get there, that's the show for you. Alan also has a show called One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. It's really more than a show. You email Alan a question about distillation. He comes back with a video answer to it. It's really great deep dive nerding out on distilling. Speaking of nerds, my Whiskey Den, they air every Monday night with Pat and Mike. 9 o'clock Monday nights. Be there where craft whiskey is king. It's a wonderful show. They have great guests. They do great tastings together. The group in the chat is always a lot of fun. So be sure to check that out. And of course, our show, Bourbon Turntable. You're here. Hit the subscribe button. However you're listening, subscribe to what we're doing. Don't want to miss out on the show, especially when we've got great content coming at you like Todd today. And we have one more announcement for you.
All right, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification to find out when new episodes come out, which is every Wednesdays on all of your streaming services everywhere, Apple, Spotify, whatever other ones there are, and the YouTube where you can watch the live recording itself.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. You are always such a professional in the way you help promote our show, on our show. Thank you very much. You're the Iron Man of Bourbon Turntable. So without further ado and further nonsense from myself or Mike, let's get on with our conversation with Todd Leopold, part 2 of our show with him. Enjoy. All right. Well, let's guys, let's take a pour of this Leopold Dickel collaboration.
Ooh.
And while we talk with Todd, ask him a few questions on the music side. So, Todd, question we ask every one of our guests is, what was your first concert? Do you remember?
My first concert was that I remember that wasn't like a nondescript, like 4th of July band is playing thing.
Right.
Was the Beach Boys at Red Rocks.
Oh.
And Leopold does not disappoint again.
All right.
I think I was, I don't know, 12, 13 or something like that. My brother was very much into the Beach Boys. My brother was very much into, there were a couple things, but that he was way ahead of the curve. He was heavy into 60s, 70s, and 80s R&B.
Okay.
He loved R&B. So that meant we had, even on the poppier side, like, Stevie Wonder's Musicarium. I grew up with that. Off the Wall, which I still love. I'm trying to think some of the other. Lou Rawls. Do you know who Lou Rawls is?
Mm-hmm.
I love Lou Rawls. And my brother would buy these albums for my parents for Christmas and stuff, stuff that would fit. Helen Reddy. I remember Helen Reddy. Yes. And I got my first albums that I got into, if that's up next. The first album I bought, 2 albums I bought was ELO.
Oh yeah.
So ELO, it was Out of the Blue.
Yep.
And then Billy Joel, 52nd Street. And then after that, I kind of went on a little bit of a Beatles thing. But what I got really into was Paul McCartney. So I got into his earlier releases, and Ram is one of my favorite albums, and still to this day. So that's where I kind of got into it. And then for me, a light bulb came on. I had a good friend who I started playing lacrosse, and he played lacrosse, and he was into the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen and Bauhaus and all of those bands that were going on at the day, and started making me mixtape. And for me, it was like a curtain was pulled back, and I got fully sucked in, because at the time in Colorado, that was the kind of shit that would get you beat up, you know, like the weirdo music, because it was all about the hair metal.
Yeah.
It was all about the hair metal. Country wasn't really that big, at least not from where I sat anyways. In junior high and high school, it was top 40 and hair metal, and you know, then you had the people that would break off, the back those days you call the stoners, that were into Zeppelin, which I immediately loved. Rush took me a while, but finally started understanding that. I've never played an instrument, so the virtuosity just went right over my head. I didn't understand that they were playing things that other musicians couldn't play. I didn't get it. So that took me a while.
So Todd, when you're first listening to the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen, I mean, is that what year was that? And are you listening to
85?
Okay.
85.
Okay.
I'm an old man.
No.
84, 85.
I'm an older man. But I have similar experience with those type bands, that it was something that's kind of like, okay, I've never heard this before. And then all of a sudden, bam, okay, this is very cool. This is very different. Yeah. And I don't know how to explain it to anybody else.
No, that's exactly it. Like, you know, of course, in the end, who's Michael Jackson's producer? I'm blanking on his name right now.
I'm sorry?
Michael Jackson's producer, who did
Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones. Yeah.
So he signed New Order to Quest Records. And I saw in an interview way the hell back then, and he's like, "Why the hell did you sign New Order?" And he's like, "They have their own voice, and it's just notes, man." You know, when I look backwards, he's right. Like, why is this considered alternative, but this is considered radio friendly? Are they really that different? And the answer is kind of not really. To me, it was just they were making sounds, and you know, Echo and the Bunnymen, when you look at their releases in 81 and 82, or Jesus, Joy Division, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, there is nothing that sounds anything like this out there right now. Right. What Peter Hook does with the bass, what the drums are, the mix of guitars, the birth of dance music, what you know, what they called, if you saw the movie 24-Hour Party People, you know, the New Order taught the white man how to dance. Speaking as one of those white men who
his bass leading the melody too, he doesn't get nearly enough credit for that. All those bands, even the ones that I absolutely love, if without that, The Cure would have never went that direction. It never would have happened. They probably owe him a giant royalty check at this point, in my opinion. But I do find this funny. I would suspect that that a large proportion of the people that are fans of your 3-chamber are probably also fans of that style of music. I bet there's a correlation there.
Interesting.
I can absolutely see. I actually have found that a couple times on a few tastings that I did, where I would drift in. You know, we drift into conversations about music. You know, it's for curious minds, and if you've got curious mind in those areas, you're looking for, you know, something different that's going on, and you know, something that isn't necessarily crammed down your throat. You know, for me at the time, I found radio offensive you know, you knew the payola was happening,
right?
Knew that you were getting aggressively marketed to. And what appealed to me about this music is the way that you found out about it was through friends and through the culture of your city and the culture of your town. It focused around a few coffee shops. It focused around a few bars. It focused around for us. So I was a year and in some cases 2 years younger. I skipped grades. So all the kids that I was in school with were older. But the kids in my grade were the last that could drink 3-2 beer. It got grandfathered out in Colorado from being 18 years old. So we were going to listen to, Blue Monday or Bizarre Love Triangle at bars, drinking cheap pitchers of beer. And the best places that actually had that the best music, there were a few gay bars in Denver. And that's where we just had so much fun because it was, for me at least, the beginning of, I guess what they call in Britain in the 90s, kind of lad culture, where you're going out to have fun instead of worrying about hooking up. And to me, the thought of asking a girl out when I was in high school was just terrifying. So going to a gay bar was great because it was so freeing. Everybody felt safe there, and you'd have, I would be sure I'd occasionally get hit on, which felt great. I'm like, oh, you think we're something awesome, and I don't have to figure out what the hell to do next.
You want to go listen to Disintegration?
Right, exactly. And just the music was wonderful, and it was, I was very, very lucky, and I guess it wasn't, I was. I probably wasn't doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, but we certainly had a lot of fun, and I do not regret that. We absolutely had a wonderful, wonderful time, and was exposed to just some wonderful music. And to us, it just sounded like London was the center of the universe, and we didn't have, or at least I didn't have, enough information to make a distinction between Manchester and London and Liverpool. And I thought it was all London.
So, yeah, right.
I thought it was all London. It just never occurred to me that they're different parts, or that there was Northern Soul and Water Boys from Scotland. No, they're from London. I just didn't make that distinction, but it was just great. It just felt like something new was happening in the world that you wanted to be a part of. It was different. It wasn't the same as everything else that was going on. And it was a really, really fun culture to be a part of.
And so music was big in your family growing up, it sounds like, because your brother was big into R&B. Were your parents big into music as well?
Not particularly. They wound up liking, what it is Scott brought, and it was, it was all great stuff. Earth, Wind and Fire, and it was all music that we liked, but they weren't. I bet my dad, if he has purchased a record since he was 18, I'd be stunned. It just wasn't his thing, and my mother tended to enjoy whatever it is Scott wound up getting her, but the rest of the family, we certainly got into it, and then Scott got into rap. I mean, he had Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five long before anybody knew what the hell that was. This was when it came out. That I did not understand. I just didn't. The early stuff. It wasn't until NWA came out that I realized what it was, or my understanding, where it was kind of telling the news. This is what's happening in my neighborhood, and this isn't necessarily the same experience that you're having. And it's like, oh, because we, again, growing up in Colorado, I've had this conversation many times. I thought all the villagers had figured out racism and anti-Semitism, and I was just naive. I had no idea. I didn't know that was the thing. I thought that was, you know, the way that it was presented in my world was, oh, that's what happened in up until the 50s, and in the 60s, we figured all that shit out. We figured the shit out with women in the 70s, and now everything is fine. I had no idea. I just, wasn't paying any attention. And then when I got to college, I'm like, oh shit, okay,
yeah,
sorted out. Okay, we got a lot of work to do.
But if you're getting in, are you getting into that around the same time that you were getting into the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen and Joy Division?
No. The music was completely independent from that. My exposure to the early stages, I guess, of gay culture in Colorado, I just didn't ever think about it in the sense of I didn't understand that they were having problems, because because when I was with it, everything's great, everything's fine, everybody's having a great time tonight. I had no idea that they were getting the crap beat out of them on the way home, or I just I was naive. Right. So I wasn't exposed to that really until college. So high school was really just kind of floating through, and I wasn't particularly political, I didn't understand. I didn't get it. I didn't understand that there was some, serious problems the country still had to work through. I thought everybody got along, and everybody loved each other, and you do what you want to do, and that's the end of it. And whoops, that's sadly not the case. So I got into college. I started getting things figured out a little bit better, and understood all the issues that we're dealing with, whether it's the bifurcation between the rich and the poor, and shit wages that everybody's figuring out. I think after COVID, the one really nice thing that came out of COVID, I think, is why am I doing this for $10 an hour? You shouldn't be doing this for $10 an hour is the answer to that question. It was very much just a musical and cultural thing. You just would get lost in the music. We would very frequently go to a friend's house or go out, and you'd put an album on and you'd listen to it intently. So I can think of the last time my friends and I were really together from that age. It was at the end of a party. I think we all kind of knew we were done with college, and we put Ocean Rain on from Echo and the Bunnymen. 2-3 o'clock in the morning, after all the shenanigans, the party had let out, everybody had gone home, and we listened to the front and the back of it, and I don't think anybody said 2 words during it. But that was a very common thing for us to do, where I had a friend that was an audiophile that had a really nice pair of Boston acoustics that I didn't understand. I was just starting to learn what impedance was. And, he refused to have an equalizer, which of course I'm like, pump up the bass, pump up the treble, like an idiot, or not. And I don't think that's an idiot thing to do. It's a fun thing to do, but he refused to. This is what the musicians want you to hear. He was one of those guys. It was pretty great. And we would take turns through his CD collection, and everybody would get to pick 3 songs, and we would just and that was our evening. So music was very much and I think I told this story with Alan, if I can't recall, KTCL, which there's a radio station up in Fort Collins, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. Most of us, anyways, didn't have a whole lot of money, and they played Joy Division Substance the day that it came out from back to front. And the appendix on that has a bunch of stuff that we hadn't heard before at all. And I'll never forget, a massive lightning storm rolled in. There were shenanigans. And it was absolutely a wonderful, wonderful way to spend an evening. I'll never forget that. And the sound system, and I'll never forget that. I have some very, very happy memories from music. I'll relate one more and then I'll get to questions. There's over by, the Red Rocks that everybody knows about.
Right.
Well, it's a sandstone formations that dot the foothills all the way down to Colorado Springs. And in the south, the western part of Littleton, there's a couple natural caves. And we enjoyed some shenanigans and had a little boom box that we put in the very corner of this Red Rock formation. And you can picture the echo that you get from this.
Right.
Yeah.
And of all things, you're going to laugh your ass off. You'd think it would be something like Pink Floyd or I don't know, whatever. It was the Fine Young Cannibals' first album, which is so rockabilly and wonderful. This was before 2003. It's really rockabilly, to my understanding of the word. And it was put on at a relatively low volume, but the echoes I'll never forget. That was a very, very common evening for us. Was music surrounded it.
Yeah,
oh, that's awesome.
No, I was when you said that. Okay, we've got this boom box in a cave. I'm thinking, okay, that's got to be Pink Floyd,
right? Or Led Zeppelin, or something a little bit more. At the end of the song, you're like, whoa. But it was more the happiness of the evening,
right?
And the music was beautiful. And it wasn't turned up to 11; it was put at 2. But the echoes made it
ambience.
You got it.
Yeah.
I wish I feel like I should have grown up in that time period in particular, because like I still put on a lot of those bands, and most of my friends, short of Kevin and Benji and a couple others, are like, what in the hell? Like, I make my dad listen to Morrissey, and my dad will just talk. He just will talk trash the whole time. But I did catch him singing Morrissey under his breath one morning. So he either likes it and won't admit it, or he's at least learned some of the lyrics. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Johnny Marr is at least worth the price of the admission. If as our friends at the time would say, or acquaintances at the time, if the whining is a bit much, he was certainly made fun of in those days for the, nobody loves me, everybody hates me. I mean, he wrote a song called Unlovable. You deserve a little bit of shit for it.
Yes, absolutely.
But at the same time, it's some of the best musical poetry out there, I think.
Yeah.
And it was certainly a huge, huge part of, part of our lives. Queen is Dead, great album.
I'm presuming there's not a lot of Def Leppard going on at the distillery.
No.
No, but the irony of it is I kind of like it when that kind of stuff comes on now.
Yep.
I don't mind it as much. I really don't. At the time, I hated it. I for a while I hated Van Halen. I got out of that before I got out of high school, because I figured out no. Oh, actually, you know what turned it around for me? You're gonna laugh. Aztec Camera did a cover. Aztec Camera was how do you describe the kind of jangle pop stuff that was going around at the time, and he did a slowed down cover of Jump that was just awesome. And you listen to the lyrics, I'm like, no, this is a good tune. This is a good tune. Fucking relax. And it took me a while. So like my sophomore and junior year, I felt like I was holding something that other people didn't understand, and it turned into a snobby thing. Mm-hmm. By the time I got finished with high school, I'm like, it's fucking music. Who cares? Let it go. It's the same thing with whiskey, right? You like what you like, and fuck off if you don't like my taste in music, right? So I let go of that silliness because it was completely unnecessary. But in my defense, at the time, it was a reaction to everybody gave you shit if you were listening to that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was a reaction to people giving you shit.
Mm-hmm. Ironically, we're about to get into a blend now, and I had a moment like you on Saturday, and Kevin knows about this, where there was a Avril Lavigne song that came on called Skater Boy, and wasn't really listening to it. It was in the background, but in my head, my brain finished the melody, but the melody was Hungry Like a Wolf, or Hungry Like the Wolf, right? So then I looked it up. I'm like, this can't be coincidental. It's not, because it's the same melody that T-Rex used.
Right.
And somebody made a mashup of all three of those. I'm like, this is actually pretty fucking good.
Like when you hear David Grohl talking about, I was just ripping off all the disco drummers.
Yes, and he absolutely was.
And it's like, oh, you totally were. I'm not a musician, so it takes me an awful long time to catch on to that kind of crap. But of course, the minute he says that, you can't unhear it.
Yeah,
you can't unhear it. And of course, everybody's ripping off everybody else. And I kind of like where we are musically these days, in the sense that all of it is accepted. Pop isn't a dirty word. Hip hop did so much to rescue radio and put some gravity into pop music, and more than just pop. But at the same time, sometimes that's what you want, bud. And I can tell you, I had a ball dancing to "Welcome to New York." There's nothing to that song at all, right? With my daughter, and sometimes that's called for, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Unless it's Nickelback.
I'm happy to say that I couldn't name a Nickelback song, so
you're a better man for it.
I don't understand the hate, because
you're fine.
I missed that whole thing.
Yeah, I'm that way with Justin Bieber. Don't know it.
Not your thing.
Won't know it.
I can't name anything from him.
Hey, but what I can name is this right here.
Wow.
So let's we've been sipping on this for a few minutes now, guys. So this is very different, right?
It's completely different. I'll let you guys do the notes on this, but I was just so impressed by the creaminess of this one. There is almost like a cordial mouth texture with it, and at the risk of hurting feelings or pissing somebody off, when I think the word Dickel, I think chalky and minerality, and I was kind of expecting that, and this is just so, like I said, creamy, almost like a cherry cordial, or one of those, I don't know what you call it, the chocolates that have the buttercream inside, kind of a texture to it. I really, really enjoy that one, just from a texture standpoint.
Well, I think that, Nicole's brilliant, and she's the one that led the blend on this. For those who don't know, that this came by accident. I wanted to, have release two things that hadn't been seen in forever. So the 3-chamber on its own, and it was very commonly, it's the same model that you still see in Scotland that wasn't interrupted by Prohibition. Which is a very flavorful whiskey with a lighter whiskey to come up with something new and something different. And I had reached out to Nicole to see if she'd know anybody who made rye, and because she knows everybody. I had no idea that Dickel had been making rye. And so she said, I'll call you back. And that's what led to this. And of course, going through all of it and trying to get it through, I'm thinking somebody at Diageo is going to say, no, this is crazy. Some little distillery that they don't own, they don't have a stake in this, coming out with a blend together with the largest spirits company in the world. This is crazy. And it made it to the shelf, and we're on our second release, and it's just been wonderful. And it's the old model. It's the old model that we had in the United States, and still had in Scotland, where you've got the flavorful, strange distilleries, your Balvenis, your Springbanks, your Lafrogues, where you're making this very flavorful, interesting, characterful spirit that not many people are interested in, right?
Right.
And then you have it being moved in a much larger blend that can be more approachable for everybody. And so that was the idea behind it. And so for me, this release is really meaningful to me, because it's just, there's so many layers to it. One of the smallest distilleries around, working with the larger distillery. Them leaving us alone. They don't tell me how to make the whiskey. They don't have a thing to do with anything other than here's your barrel.
Yep.
They don't want to own us, which is, nice too. And so we're be able to, we get to keep our independence and at the same time, for this particular bottling, obviously they have much better distribution. To say they have better marketing is the Zoom calls that we had were loads of fun. Where Todd, and who's your head of marketing, who's your head of sales? I'm like, I'm the point man for all of this stuff, and they got used to it. They've treated me with complete respect, probably more than I deserve. They've been a really, really great partner so far. And my brother and I, this is not our first rodeo, so we are very cynical, obviously, but it's really worked out well. And I think the whiskey's beautiful. And I think the story behind it and the uniqueness of it is it has a reason to exist. It's not just another bottle on the shelf. And yes, on the minerality and I didn't know that people looked. I didn't find out that was like a perceived negative until I got to the distillery and the press that was there was talking about it. The Flintstones comment. And all I've ever thought about Dickel was, I cannot believe how good this whiskey is at this price point. Holy shit. That was always my perception of Dickel. So Dickel in Colorado was the insider whiskey for years. This was, of course, before the boom and more of a, Jack Daniels, right? Okay, well, this is its lesser known younger brother, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And for me, the I guess I taste, the minerality and the Flintstone vine. I like it. I think it's I like it when a distillery has a house flavor and something that's distinctive that you can pick it out and say, that is so-and-so. Because if you don't have that, excuse me,
non-distinct.
Then to me, what are you doing? I want tasting that honeyed note, for instance, that you guys mentioned earlier. To me, that's very distinctive. It's a little bit more pronounced in the 3-chamber, but to me, I get it in barrel of rye that you're going to be tasting, hopefully.
So I think, and I'll touch on the notes on this in a second on my end, but I think that was a great idea as far as like, listen, if you're going to put this in somebody that's new to blended whiskey, right? This is a really good way to get somebody into blended whiskey. I think if they're not, on the bourbon spectrum, and I call it the bourbon spectrum, but I think that this is exactly how you get those people interested in the deeper things and get them there. And it's a great use of it. And it's exactly historically what has been done in the past, as you said. The other part of it, so I'm not a huge Dickel fan, but I don't immediately go Flintstone vitamins like a lot of people tend to go on that. I do get some of the chalkiness, etc. I don't get it out of this. I get another note in here though that I'll talk about that I actually like a lot on this, and I think it's a modification of that sort of minerality. It's ironic with Dickel though. So, and I'm going to get punched in the throat by somebody for saying this. I guarantee it. So they put out a White Dog several years back. I don't even know if they still make it. That was the single closest thing to well-made all grain moonshine that any commercial distillery on the face of the planet ever put out. Some home distiller is going to punch me in the throat for saying that. I guarantee it. It's coming. But it was good. And I bought several bottles of it. I probably bought a case of it. But kind of coming back to this on the nose. So there's a distinct, almost like, and this is a fat kid tasting note, Kevin. So like Haribo, like gummy bears sort of thing, right? Or like even like a Flavorite sort of popsicle thing. And I don't find it offensive at all. As a matter of fact, when I went to it, I like immediately had flashbacks of my childhood on that one. So I can't complain at all about the nose on that for sure. It's really nice.
It's almost like that grape Kool-Aid note. Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which when I find that in a whiskey, I'm pretty psyched about it because I think it's a very cool note.
Well, it's been a really, really fun journey, and I'm super proud of the whiskey. When we first started blending it, we were laughing because, in our opinion, the two whiskeys go so well together, and it has notes that the way I make whiskey doesn't have, and vice versa. So to me, they just play really well together. And
it's still chewy too.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
Yep.
She's we had her leading we were laughing because she's like, well, who should take the lead on the blending? And I said, well, I think I've blended maybe 4 or 5 barrels together in my career, Nicole. So why don't we leave it up to the professional who's used to, I mean, each one of her warehouses has 70,000 barrels in it. That's blending.
Right.
What I do is mingling, if you even want to call it that. I mean, she's taking stuff that's 20 and mixing it with 10, and I just simply don't have the experience that it makes any sense for me to lead. But we found out very quickly that we had the same vision for these things. It did not take long to come up with the blend. But to tie it into music, it was very much like Postal Service, right? Do a blend, send it back, right? Send it back and forth. And that's how it was done. It was done during the height of the pandemic. So we started I saved the email of I'll call you tomorrow. And that was December of 2020.
That's awesome.
And we got it on the shelves by the fall of 2021. Which, understanding how big of a company Diageo is, was like the greatest Christmas miracle of all. Yeah, she's remarkable. And so she's not just doing her job. She's navigating a corporate culture, which is, something I don't think I could do. I'm just used to dealing with my older brother, which has its positives and its negatives, mostly positive, of course. But she's cut out for it. She's very, very good at her job, and it's been a lot of fun watching her career. It's just been pretty remarkable.
Now and as we were going through this, as I would taste it and just let it sit, that honey note that comes through, it's not just it doesn't get overpowered by the Dickel rye, which traditionally Dickel is sourced their rye, but this is
all in-house.
Nicole did this on their column, right?
Nicole showed up and had some already there, and they were trying to figure out what to do. So that the very first batch, at least, I believe, all of it had been distilled before she arrived, and they had done it with an eye toward going with their own in-house rye, obviously. And they weren't happy because it wasn't flavor matching with MGP. Personally, I'm thrilled with. I think it's a beautiful
and
there's nothing wrong with MGP. I don't mean to say that. But,
no, I get that, but everybody has 95.5 MGP rye. Give me something different, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I was just so pleased with how with what I'm sure both of us when we let's do this. She had had the 3-chamber before. But I hadn't had hers, and she sent it out, and I was like, that it was a lovely whiskey and works well.
Yeah, but this is readily available, and when this first came out, when I first heard about it, I was calling Dickel and saying, hey, when are you going to have this in? When are you going to have this in? And can you save me a bottle? Because I was concerned, it's going to be like all this other stuff that Todd does, and it's going to be gone. I'll never see it. And so we have family down in Tennessee, about, 2 hours from Tullahoma. And I got up the day before Christmas Eve and drove to Cascade Hollow to get this.
All right.
And was so excited, but now I'm glad that I can get it in stores. Actually, it's on a shelf, so that's very cool.
Yeah, and how beautiful is the distillery?
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
So they flew me down with the press for the initial tasting and all that kind of thing. Excuse me. And I was talking with Wayne Curtis, who's was writing for the Daily Beast, and he's written for everybody. Really great writer, and I'd known him before. And I'm just like, you can't make this shit up. It really is a hollow. You got a creek running by the distillery that's out of central casting. It's all green. It's all beautiful. It is a complete utilitarian distillery built in 1953, which to me is just the coolest thing. They still have, some of those old dial recorders. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Used to spin
on the aldehyde panels and all that stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
they still have that. It's just
those are cool. That's a bygone day right there.
It was. I was a kid in the candy store, and it's like this is as authentic as you get, and this is what the other younger distilleries. You can't buy this. This is the real deal. And it just, what a wonderful experience it was to get to go down and get to meet some of their crew. And then we went up to visit some of their new warehouses again. So they have some that are ricked. I'm sorry about the coughing. And then some that are palletized, and the new ones that are palletized, it felt like that the ending scene of Indiana Jones. With the
warehouse,
yes, yeah, where the warehouse is 100. It felt like that. It's like, wow.
What really cool on this too? Another fat kid tasting note. I'm curious if you guys pick this up, because this might just be a weird thing that I'm getting. So you get that effervescence at the end, and it comes back up the tongue. It's obviously not as bright as it is just in the 3-chamber, and it's a little more spicy on the back end. I hesitate to say peppery because I don't want to continue to use that word with rye all the time, because I think it's a misnomer in a lot of ways. But then it goes back to that fruity characteristic, but it almost comes off with like almost like a saltwater taffy sort of thing. That fruitiness is still there. There's like a little salt to the side of the tongue that I'm getting.
Kind of like a lemon or orange saltwater taffy. Is that what?
Yeah. Definitely get that.
Good. I thought I was going insane there for a minute.
No.
I felt like I was out on a branch on that one. Yeah. So,
but in this, you get a few more of the what I would say are more traditional rye tasting notes.
Yes.
You're getting some of that vanilla and cinnamon and some of that pepperiness in there, but it plays so well with what you're getting out of the 3-chamber, that it tastes more like a rye, but it's a very different rye.
Yeah, and that's the part I've been most happy with, the reaction of folks that are noticing this is very different. This is of course what we want. We didn't want to have it be the same as the 95.5 or whatever else you want to throw out there.
Yeah, you did great there. There's no damn Robitussin on it, so I'm a happy camper.
You can thank Nicole for that. Yes,
right.
She just did it. She just did a lovely job.
Well, let's try this. Put this 5-year-old Maryland bottled and bond in our glass, and we'll get Todd to tell us about that in just a second. But I want to talk about your jukebox. Your infamous jukebox. Okay, when did you develop this?
That was something that we wanted very early on, and we finally found a company. Those jukeboxes are so expensive, and we just didn't have the money for one up front. But there was a company out of Detroit that was expanding into Ann Arbor that would set everything up. You'd split the proceeds.
Okay.
Set everything up for the jukebox, pool table, We had Golden Tea,
Nice.
which my brother got addicted to.
Now this was in Ann Arbor.
This is in Ann Arbor in the pub.
Right.
So we had that. We had Medieval Madness, which is just a wonderful pinball. I love pinball. Then he'd rotate through some fun stuff, Galaga, some stuff like that. Kind of throwback video games. But he wanted to put in a digital jukebox, and I would rather eat a bowl of my own hair than to in control of the music at my place. And so he finally agreed to get me a box, and I filled it myself. And this was really the very kind of start of the internet and email and that sort of thing. And I knew enough from my nerdy days in high school and in college what a record label was, what the good ones were, and to reach out to them. I knew they all had interns, and to try and get new releases so that we would get stuff for free, which was awesome. Really before anything really came out. And so I got the Postal Service, I got LCD sound system, which I fell in love with because it was called Losing My Edge, which was very much speaking to old man Todd, that everybody else was way too cool. And I was in Ann Arbor. I mean, come on. Ann Arbor, by the way, is the home of All Music Guide. I don't know if that rings a bell, but All Music Guide started as a catalog and morphed into a CD review service, album review service. So if you would pull up Apple Music, Stereolab, Dots and Loops, you'd have the review from. So it's something that they sold. So these were some, and you'd see the head reviewers would be on VH1 all the time, right? So they're really well-known musical critics that were, and they all lived in Ann Arbor, and they'd all come to our place. So on top of what I knew, we had these music specialists that knew everything. So between the two, I would try to make it so that about a third of it was new releases. So because, for me, as I mentioned, that those albums that I told you about, they're stuck to a very specific time, and we were very big in those days about what's new, and trying not to get stuck in an old rut and listen to the same album over and over again, which I couldn't avoid either. But and so I would put little asterisks next to the new. The tracks that I thought were, singles essentially that you might want to hear to get a sampling of whoever the band is. And you could track digitally. It actually worked. People were trying the new stuff. But then, of course, I do everything from, again, Earth, Wind, and Fire, or Face to Face, or, X, or Ecstasy, or, the Wolfgang Press. I'd always have, for my favorite bands, there was always be something from Echo and the Bunnymen, always something from New Order / Joy Division.
Right.
Always something from always have James Brown in, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder. Their Motown would rotate in and out, proximity to Detroit, obviously. You want to do that. But then kind of with an emphasis on new stuff, and it became something that people would come for, and I'd get these wonderful notes, of course, because if you're into that sort of thing and you don't know anything about it, and you wander into this place in Ann Arbor and you go to the jukebox and they're like, why do you have the Wild Swans and Billy Bragg and Aretha and all of these relatively obscure albums? Excuse me. So I got more than a few lovely notes from people saying this is the most fantastic jukebox I've ever seen, and so it was just something that was fun. It was fun. It kept us grounded in what was going on at the time. And you know, music was such a, especially when we were making beer, you know, we bottled for, I think, 1.5 years. And it's so redundant and mundane and repetitive that having upbeat, good albums from start to finish, you know, Jets to Brazil, played the hell out of that. Postal Service, I mentioned, Sparta, Wiretap Scars, we played that into the ground. LCD Sound System, I mentioned. It was important to me at the time because we weren't exactly making money hand over fist. We were struggling. To at least feel like you were doing your best to make this a cultural place, like that, that this isn't Teacher Fridays, that this place is different. And what we found is that as we put more of our personality into the place, the better it did, the better the brewery / distillery did. Well,
it's the photos of that you had posted at one point of the song listings. It is very eclectic.
Yes, to say the least.
And there's something on there for, I think, about everybody.
Well, that was the idea, and a lot of those bands, and of course, understand that I wound up getting into arguments with people about it, right? Whether it was people that work there or people, I did my best to put in what I would call. We had the New Pornographers out. The band, the New Pornographers, came and visited the distillery right before COVID hit. And I explained to them that they're a salsa band. And they said, "What the hell is a salsa band?" I said, "It's like you always have to have salsa on the table or in the refrigerator, and nobody's going to complain about salsa." Okay. So New Pornographers, to me, like their first 3-4 albums are like, who the fuck's going to complain about this, right? You're not going to like this. This might not be your favorite thing, but you're not going to complain. You know, so again, Aretha, Stevie Wonder, David Bowie, these are, you may not love this with every fiber of your being the way I might, but you're not going to complain. The Police, there's another easy one, right? Where these are things that generally speaking, you're not going to be too surly about. So we did our best to do that. What we found, though, of course, I found lots of really good compilation albums, or if I put Nothing Shocking in, what would happen? The frat boys would come in and play Jane Says. What I learned to do, because I had to type up all of the things, because they didn't come with cards. I had to type them all up.
Right.
Myself by hand. So instead of, you know, I would make up nonsensical stuff. Like, so instead of Jane Says, it would be like Red Shoes, like something that doesn't rhyme, doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that was fun for me too, because people were like, "I know Jane Says is on this album. Where is it? Why is it not?" And I did that so that people wouldn't play the damn thing over and over again. They play the other songs on the album. And the way I got my assistant is kind of a fun story for him. I was having an ongoing conversation. There were instructions that were to who the hell has instructions? But I had instructions to the side, together with the monthly top 10, I think I did. And at the year end, disc 1 through 10 was my 10 favorite albums of the year, by the way. That was a fun thing.
Very cool.
And but it basically said, look, you have to stop playing you know, OK Computer with a full house and pick the saddest Radiohead song you can possibly find, so that everybody thinks you're cool. You have to stop doing it. So what I ended up doing was, at the end of it, there was OK Computer, and then instead of the card with the list songs, it was me yelling at them, basically. I warned you not to do this. This is why we can't have nice things. Now and of course, I'm just having fun. I'm not, you know, serious really about any of it. But my future assistant read that and said, "That's cool," and he applied. And ended up getting Eric to work for us for an awful long time before he
outstanding
left to get his master's in computer engineering. Now works for Zoom.
Wow.
Irony.
Yeah.
Now, so the jukebox didn't make it to Denver, did it?
No, my brother said he'd do it if it was that important to me, but I think it was like $12,000.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that important to me at the time.
Yeah.
If we would have been a little bit more flush with cash, I might have asked him to do
Yeah.
that, but that wasn't a fair thing to ask of him. So
what it was his brother was like, so this jukebox, you want to take that? And Todd's like, about that. So there's this thing called a 3-chamber.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we saved our money for better things, I think.
Yeah.
So
at the distillery, does music play into what you're doing?
Very, very much so. But for me, the rule is whatever the crew likes. No, what I would call Sergeant Sandpants music, because again, you're trying to work, you're trying to hustle. I don't let them play it as loud as they might like for safety reasons, so that you can hear what the hell's going on. But yeah, it still is. It still is. For the most part, I think that they do Spotify, and we rotate through all kinds of stuff. But for the most part, when I show up and it's just me, I'm plugging my iPhone in and listening to what I want to listen to. Weekends and evenings when nobody's around, and music is very tied into what I do and how I think and the artistry side of what we do. I think it's okay to say that without sounding like a pretentious twat, but I do think there's quite a bit of creativity in what we're doing that just doesn't fit into the science of distilling, where we still don't have all the answers, and that's the territory where I enjoy the most, where it's just kind of magic.
Yeah. So today, if you were to plug in your iPhone at the distillery, what would we be listening to? Would it be some of the same things that we've been talking about, or is there anything new that you enjoy?
I kind of got a little disconnected because of my daughter, right? So I've been making mixes for her where I'm trying to ease her into some of the things that I like without pushing it.
Right.
So introducing her to Bjork and Kate Bush and throwing muses and some of these other things where I know I can't play her this. She's 8. I can't play her 20 of what she calls dad music. Right.
Right.
That doesn't work. What I can do is slip in a couple of those songs before we slip into Madonna, or she likes Beyonce. She said, Dad, there's swearing in this song, but Kayla, who was her nanny, but Kayla said it's okay, but there's swearing in this. And I'm just like, I don't want to say this out loud, but honey, I don't care. that doesn't bother me. I'm not going to say that. But let's let the musicians do their thing, and you can figure it out. What I've been trying to teach her is using silly words is much more fun than swearing, and if you can get creative with language, that's much more interesting. Right. And so far, that's been working.
So you've played her Sussudio.
Yeah, actually, yes. And again, a little Van Halen, a little, so I try to mix it up. For me, I guess I do tend to kind of go down memory lane a little bit, when I'm distilling and I'm by myself. But I haven't come across a whole lot that's new outside of through my daughter lately that I'm all that jazzed about. I haven't come across anything that I'm like, ooh, this. In at least a year, if not 2, and so part of it is I don't have a whole lot of time, and I've kind of gotten sucked into the world of podcasts. Alan, thank you very much for that. You're welcome. Where I'm enjoying that when I've got the short little drives that I have. I'm not listening to music as much. usually I'm in the car so little that's where I try to catch up with friends and relatives and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
Well, let's talk about this Maryland rye here. First of all, tell us what that means.
Nothing. If you didn't know, this was the first Maryland style rye released since the last Maryland distillery, Baltimore Pure, shut down in the 60s. And when it was something that I'd read about. What is all this hubbub and talk about Maryland rye? What does that mean? What is Monongahela rye? What does that mean? And the way that I like to describe the process is I was having fun, and I was trying to find without having any marketing dollars. That was a part I didn't understand. Young and stupid. I was trying to find a way to communicate to whiskey fans something that isn't overly spicy and leans more heavily on the floral notes, leans more heavily on the fruit notes. It's not as dark. It's much lighter to stick to our discussion of colors. And I was just having fun. That was it. So it's the same thing. But if you tell a brewer, a brewer specifically, or somebody that's fairly into beer, this is a West Coast IPA. Well, what do you picture? To me, I picture citrusy hops, right?
Right.
Do all of them use citrusy hops? Of course they don't. Of course not. It's different depending on the distillery, but generally speaking, and that was kind of the field I was playing on. In my mind, the idea was that over time, as the whiskey market got more developed, you'd have your whiskey map, right? And you'd have your Maryland style and you'd have your Pennsylvania style. That's where my head was at the time. Of course, that's a completely ridiculous and stupid thing because I was only doing, 20 to 100 to 200 barrels a year.
Don't burst my bubble, Todd. I'm still hoping for it.
But I wasn't really making that much of it, but it did get people talking about it. I'm very proud about that. But that was my experience, and the distilleries, the mothball distilleries that I tasted, Baltimore Pure, the Rosenville Distillery. I'm trying to think. It's been so goddamn long now. They tend to be. I'm sorry.
It reminds me of one that I've had, which is Melrose.
Yes, I had Melrose.
Yeah, it has a lot of that same characteristic to it.
What I was trying to do was that. I want to do that. How do I get those flavors? How do I suppress the formation of the 4-vinyl glycol? So it is not a bruisey rye.
Right.
It is. I was just trying to give people paint a different picture as to how this whiskey tastes, and give homage to those mothball distilleries. I was on a podcast with Brian Tracy from Sagamore, and he was very aware that we had done this and that we were the first to release it. And he was kind enough to say, "Hey, thanks, because you've made my job a little bit easier." Tell people that there's a Maryland style rye. Sagamore Spirits is doing Maryland rye now with the stuff that's they're switching to local farm. They're drifting away from whatever it is that they were getting before, which was naturally sourced. So they're starting to make what I would call Maryland rye now. Now, of course, to me, this means they're a distillery in Maryland. Right. So for this, we're releasing it just at Leopold Brothers, just at the distillery. We just have a few barrels. That will improve as the years go by, and should be able to do some releases outside of the state. It is 65% corn, 15% rye. The rest, again, that high amount of malted barley. To me, it's much lighter fruits. It's much more effervescent. You still get that floral note. In at 50% alcohol, out at 50% alcohol. Bottled and done.
So give that those mash bill percentages again, please.
I'm sorry, 65% rye.
Yeah. Okay.
15% corn, and 20% malted barley. And there's some other things in there. So, you know, we make what we call a whiskey malt, which is kind of a mix between a Munich and a Vienna malt. So there's some nuttiness to it. There's some sweetness to it. There's some treacle that you get out of it. And we also took some brews here. I might have to move and get closer to a plug here in a second. That we turned into chocolate rye. But out of the 2,000-pound charge, it's literally, I have told the guys, do you see that bag? Grab a fistful, throw it in.
Throw it right. Contrast.
You're done. Contrast. Right. Exactly. So that you get that. To me, I've had whiskeys where the distiller, it's one thing that I have found. I like most whiskeys. I've liked all different expressions, but the one thing that I've found that is not for me is when they use roasted malt in high proportions to the point where in the finish it tastes like you're sucking on a coffee bean. It's very unpleasant. So for anything that were roasted, it is way the hell less than 1%. And I can absolutely taste it in the mash. I can absolutely taste it in the distillate. And I can absolutely taste it in the finish. It's just little hiccup of chocolate that you get from that.
Yep.
That I really like. And so we're really, really, I was always the brewer, and I didn't find out this was a thing until social media became a thing and I could see some brewers form. I always hated crystal malt in beer. And the reason is when crystal malt oxidizes, it tastes like it has really, really bad bready notes to it that has that same kind of acrid characteristic. And so I always wondered, you know, as a brewer, I'm like, why are brewers using this shit? It's awful. It tastes great on day one, but by the time you hit day 14, it's for shit. So I always wondered why aren't you using more lightly kiln malt, or of course pulling way the hell back on the amount that you're using. So I've found that crosses over into distilling, where that's the one thing when I get that, I can't drink that whiskey. It's
right.
Just,
Yep. Yeah. For me, this one on the nose comes off obviously quite a bit lighter than the three chambers do, but it leans, to me, it goes almost like a honeyed pumpernickel sort of thing. Like it's a light pumpernickel sort of characteristic. I get a little bit more of the spice on the palate, but the cool thing I get off of that little bit of spice that's there is, and I didn't think about the chocolate malt until you mentioned it. I wasn't picking up chocolate. My brain was registering something between where that little bit of honey was there, but almost like a toasted coconut characteristic that was coming through on the backside.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
I really like that. Yep. Yeah. I was going to go somewhere along the nut brittle with cinnamon thing. I was getting the spice. I was getting the nut. I was getting, that thing. The fruit to me skewed a little bit more like peach, but I can totally see in that tropical world, the toasted coconut, now that you say that, really shines as I'm thinking through it. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's some dried fruit in there. Maybe a little molasses, maybe.
I could see, molasses makes sense. It's interesting to me too there that so for me it's obviously it's not as chewy as the three chamber, but but interestingly enough, on my palate it comes off more oily than the three chamber did.
I would agree.
So the weight of it's really nice.
The way it sits on the tongue. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just,
I think the overall oiliness, and I have absolutely nothing to prove this with, I'm going to have to move and plug this in. It is that low entry proof.
Yeah. I really, really like this.
I'm glad you do.
This is the one that would cause me to miss work.
Yeah. Right.
It's a fun one to make. We've put down quite a bit of it. Well, at our scale anyway.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. I just really like it, and we've got a lot of fans. We've had it on for, we've been selling it for so long, and we pulled it out of the market for 2 years, and so now we've got quite a few people that are very happy to be able to pick it up again. And
I've got one of the old bottles of this. So I'll look forward to trying this side by side.
I think this will probably dust the older bottles pretty well.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had it. I remember really enjoying it, but it'll be nice to revisit
what you will notice is a lot more of that lavender note.
Okay.
In the younger, that's one thing I've said in the past. If I had a bottomless amounts of money, I would release our whiskeys backwards. Come out with a 15, then come out with a 10, then come out with a 5, and then with the Maryland rye, the 3, which is what we had before.
Yep.
Because of that floral note was so dominant at that age. I thought it was. It made it a very interesting bottle that wasn't really like anything else.
Yeah, and that floral's still there. It's
not as big.
Yeah.
So this is distillery only, correct?
Yes, sir. At least I don't know if we're going to do a release of it outside next year or not, but we should be able to do that the year after.
Okay.
I'm going to save some of this to AB against Solomon Scott too tomorrow at work. So,
right on.
There you go.
Because we're same percentage of rye in the two of them. So
yeah, they're just again going off memory. I think they'll be very different.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
I love them both.
Yeah.
But I think the contrast will be very interesting.
I think so too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a blend with it too.
There you go. Yeah. I smell another collaboration down the pike.
Just be me bothering Todd and sending him like vintage 45s, being like, please,
please
do this with me.
Todd, hey Todd.
Speaking of that, my brother has 78s. He collected 78s.
Oh
wow.
78s of again R&B. That was his.
Yeah.
That was his thing, and it still is. He still loves that stuff, and I just think it's great. He's an engineer, and he's like, what kind of music are you into? And you'd think he'd say, I can take it or leave it, and instead he'll, talk your ear off about Quincy Jones and some of the really wonderful stuff. So at least it was good that he wasn't listening to things when he was 2 years older than I was that was driving me up a wall or anything. I actually liked it okay. And then of course, the stuff that I came in, he was not. I think the first album, we got back together after, we've gone our separate ways to get the business started. And we were in Kansas City and we fixed up a house that he had bought and sold it. And that was our seed money.
Wow.
And out of everything, some of the albums that we listened to, he loved Morphine. So I got Cure for Pain when we were putting the business together. And then also he really liked Swerve Driver. I'm a huge Swerve Driver fan. And of all the bands in the world, the two bands in the world for him to like, even Swerve Driver is like, all right, but yeah, we played the crap out of those. So those are always remind me of sitting on wood floors. He had roommates that moved out before we sold the house. And I remember putting the business plan together, which was God knows how many pages, and sitting in shorts on a wood floor and turning around again and again and again to collate the business plan with Morphine blaring in the background.
Yeah. The thing that really struck me, and I guess it wasn't until this conversation that I really connected the dots, is I look at you as very much into the scientific aspects of distilling and the cutting edge technology that's as old as a 3-chamber still, but when I couldn't really connect. Okay, how is somebody that I perceive as being that type of personality that much into things like Joy Division and Echo and the Bunnymen, and
Mm-hmm.
but tonight I think that it all makes sense. It's the artistry of that music and the artistry of the whiskey that you're making.
Yeah,
that's the connection. That's what makes sense.
It's the trying to contribute a verse. You know, that old Shakespearean line, right?
Right.
And what's your verse going to be? And you know, I'm not curing cancer. I'm not teaching kids. I'm not doing those noble things, but I'm participating in the culture.
Yeah.
And whether you want to look at it as global or local or it's so fun being on. So we just started releasing our spirits in Canada. I'm going up to Edmonton, and they're shocked that I want to come up there. And I'm like, I've been wanting to come to Edmonton I can't, you know. So I was on a couple whiskey shows, one that was out of Calgary, and I'm a total Canada dork. In the sense that I'm a hockey nerd. I've watched more hockey this year than I have in a long time. I love the sport. I love that it's part in Canadian culture. I love that in America it's kind of the anti-sport. It's so different. The culture is so different. And really one of the fun ways I got to learn about that, Jordan Leopold played for the Avalanche. He played for a bunch of teams in his career, but he ended up playing for the Colorado Avalanche. He reached out to us because he saw a bottle of our gin on the bar. Leopold, what the hell is this? And so we got to know the family, and we got to just wonderful people. They're out of Minnesota, and every bit. Picture a hockey player from Minnesota, right? Total salt of the earth.
Right.
Nicest people you ever want to meet.
You betcha.
And right. And he was describing, because they both played at the Pepsi Center, the Nuggets did, with their $80 billion salaries.
Right.
And half of the hockey team is making the league minimum and doesn't know if they'll be shipped out. Right.
Right.
Playing their guts out and don't know if this is going to be a career or not. And can I stay on the squad? And do I have to beat the shit out of somebody I don't want to fight, but if this means I stay, then okay.
Right.
The culture, of it, the fact that they speak French in part of it. My daughter's in an immersion school, so she speaks French.
Wow.
We went to Quebec, which is just absolutely, what a beautiful city, and the food and of course my daughter's just as happy as can be because she's chirping away, and she has a Parisian accent because all of her teachers grew up in Paris. So here's this little American kid with a Parisian accent.
That's amazing.
And she has a sense of humor, I've learned, right? So she's using idioms. She's not just she's saying funny things and just being immersed in that culture was just absolutely wonderful. And I love the idea of sharing our culture. This is what Colorado is about. I'm trying to put Colorado in a bottle. I'm trying to have at least some sort of an artistic conversation. And yeah, I get it. That sounds pretentious, but it's true. I'm trying to express myself, and this is how I do it. And being a small part of that, being a guy pulling on the rope, you're realizing that I'm not some famous Kentucky master distiller that everybody knows about. I'm just some distiller in Colorado. I like that. I like that there's in food there's a pecking order. The hot shit chefs, hot shit winemakers, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Brewers, there's quite a few that are famous, and the distillers just kind of, I don't know where they put us in the back somewhere. And I like that. I like that we're not held in unnecessary esteem, I guess, and so it's the conversations that you get to have with people is much more interesting. And I didn't like it earlier in my career. I just wanted to be left alone with my stills. Mr. Allen can relate to that.
Leave me alone.
But as I'm getting a little older, and I still now listen, you know, from your description, Alan, you were doing some fucking festival like every weekend. I've never had to do that. What I'm talking about is going out 6 to 10 times a year and sharing how we do things with people that are interested in it. And when it's in a foreign city, whether that means Chicago or Edmonton, I really enjoy it. And I enjoy that people are interested in what it is you're doing. I feel incredibly lucky that the lights are still on. I can't believe I still get to do this. It's just, I feel incredibly lucky. And I feel very proud to be a part of the culture in Denver and the culture in Colorado. It's nice. I feel it falls under my understanding that I got watching Sesame Street. There's the grocer, there's the baker, they took pride in what they did. Every town has the best, whatever the hell it is.
Right.
And I just like that. I like being a nice, simple distiller that the town appears to be somewhat pleased with what we do, and that we're not complete hacks.
I would say you guys are far from hacks out there. We have loved every single thing that we've tasted. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on a very short list of the original, what I consider the original craft distillers that we talked about before. That there's a number of us that look up to you and guys like you and Chip Tate and Richard Seal and even Ted Bro. I mean, it's a very short list of people that really laid out the pathwork for the rest of us. We're all copying your footsteps, whether you realize it or not. So.
Well, I you know, as I said, I'm tickled pink to hear that people are dropping 3-chamber stills. That's how great is that? I said it before. I was hoping that you know that would happen. I might even like it more that it's on a smaller scale, smaller scale than ours is, which is which is hard to imagine. But you know, it's certainly been a really fun ride. We're looking forward to the next few years here. We've got a lot of fun stuff that's coming. We did a 100% a bruising malt where we malted it again, pushing up into the dark Munich territory. We really pushed it smelled like somebody dumped peanut shells into the fermenter. Is crazy. And it sucked and it was hard and it doesn't move. It's not trying to be put on the goddamn floor. And it was one of I was spent the whole day as the guys are trying to get it out of the steep tank, apologizing to the guys. Normally it's an hour-and-a-half job. It was a 12-hour job.
Wow.
And I'm looking at them going, guys, I'm sorry. I didn't foresee this. I apologize. I thought it was going to be a problem when it was on the floor, but we couldn't get it in that steep tank to collapse. It was just sticky enough that it was holding. And so we're in there with sticks just trying to knock it in for 12 hours. But to their credit, our malting team, I brought them all out when we finally got it into the still, and they tasted it, and I didn't say a word, and they went, fuck. We're gonna have to do it again. They were thrilled with the whiskey. The whiskey was just gorgeous, and it's going to be a massive, massive whiskey. And they take pride in, okay, this is worth it. This is really hard. I'm hoping you buy us better tools before we do it again. But it's worth the effort, and we're very lucky to have a team here that takes pride in what we do here. Isn't easy. That we don't do, you know, we're luckier than most. We're not stirring mash by hand anymore. We started with that. And we have, you know, we have augers that work. We have boilers that work now, right? We have pumps that work. So we're luckier than most. But they're more than willing to put in the work for something that tastes great. So we've got some really fun stuff here that we've got planned, Alan, that you'll really dig. And as we get them produced and get them into barrels, we'll tell folks more about it. Yeah. And we'll get that. It's too cold. It's below freezing today. We'll get the Dunder Pit fired up again here in about another 2 months. And we're all very excited about that project and how that's been coming along.
It sounds like we've got a trip that we need to take out to Denver.
You know where to find us.
Well, Todd, thank you very much for being on with us. This has been fantastic. I hope you had a good time.
I absolutely did. I probably, as usual, talked too much, but
no, sir. Love to hear from you both on the whiskey side of things and the music side of things, and it was all very very interesting and a great time. And I know that we had a good time with it, and I'm sure that the folks that watch the show will too. But before we get out of here, we want to give you a chance. Tell people where they can find you on social media and where they can find your whiskey.
Oh shit. the $1,000 question, right? Social media, we're on Instagram at Leopold Bros. Same for Facebook, I guess. I don't know if I don't do the Twitter thing. I don't have the patience for that. Where you can find our whiskey. I think actually we're finally going to be expanding into Kentucky and Tennessee this year. So I guess that's good news. But out your way, Missouri, you can get our spirits in both Missouri and Kansas. Mm-hmm. The collaboration is making more. I know they're going to be in Ohio this year. And I should be able to speak to Indiana, but I can't. I'm not sure if it's going to hit Indiana. Did you notice it anywhere?
I've not seen it.
It's in Kentucky, but I've not seen it in Indiana.
Yeah, it's in Kentucky. It's in Tennessee. It's in Ohio. And I don't know how much land it. I obviously didn't have any control over over how much and the whens and wheres. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I really enjoyed it, guys. If it wasn't past my bedtime, I could do another hour or two. Well, here's about the crazy crap I did in high school.
Well, we'll just do this again. After the next 3-chamber comes out, or when you have
absolutely.
Out. So just come on and talk music with us. We don't have to worry about the whiskey stuff. We'll just talk music and make that the show.
Make that the show. Right on, guys. Yeah. Thank you so much. Alan, if I said anything stupid or wrong about distilling, don't laugh too
hard. Right. Yeah. Sure, buddy.
Alan, where can folks find you on social?
You can find me at spiritsofFrenchlick.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, and then if you have Ghost, you have Everything podcast, Distiller Stock podcast, and One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute.
Yeah, you need a few more things to do. Drew, how about you?
If you don't mind, real quick. If you're a distiller listening to that and you're not tuned in and subscribed to that one thing at a time, you're a fool.
Yeah. Hey, and get the book, right?
Yes.
Get the book.
There's another one coming.
Amazing.
Yeah. Like I said, you need
how do you sleep?
This is why I've had a headache for 2 days, man.
He's a zombie. Drew, where can folks find you and find your music?
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter being an asshole all the time at Drew Crawley 63. I'm on Instagram at Drew.Crawley63. That's where I promote a lot of the music stuff, live shows, recording, releases, all that kind of stuff. And then wherever you listen to music, whether that be Spotify, Apple, Amazon, you can find what we have out. Keep your eyes peeled. I think at the time of the release of this show, we will be a couple of days out from another single, and then an album announcement is coming soon. So check it out.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
Thank you.
As for the show, you can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform, as long as it's Apple or Spotify or Google. We have a YouTube page where we release all of our shows to. We have a YouTube page. We have a Facebook page where we release all our shows to. We have a Facebook group where we encourage folks to go on there. Tell us what you're drinking. Tell us what you're listening to. Maybe it's something that somebody hasn't listened to in a while or hasn't ever heard of. So this is a great way to build a little community within the show. So please participate in that. So thank you again, Todd. Thank you, Alan, for joining us as a guest host. And on behalf of Drew and myself, thank you all for watching. Until next time, cheers, love, and free bird.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.